Monday. File returns, by the way.
Magansho like file and returns.
Atrere. Mo file returns shanyusha KRA.
Is a file returns. Body. Deadline chiegni.
Najue. No file returns yaku.
Wachire kwa file returns chao.
Mara wa file returns.
Ndirenda didikane ku file ni wotikagie penalty. Ogwo file Monday. File returns well.
We are live.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caroline Gitegi from Kenya Revenue Authority, the Department for Intelligence, Strategic Operations, Investigations and Enforcement. I want to welcome our viewers, both from locally, from regionally, and also globally, and also the private sector from KEPSA, CAM, among other entities that are attending, are participating in this engagement. With me here, I have Mr. Omole. Mr. Omole is our subject matter expert, and he's going to take us through this engagement for mainstreaming ethics and integrity, customs and border control operations. We're going to focus on global trends, development, and impact. Mr. Omole, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Kara. Good morning, viewers. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to take this opportunity also to welcome our viewers. I know we are being listened to from all corners of this country. And today we are here to focus on mainstreaming of ethics and integrity in as far as customs and border and control department is concerned. As you heard, my name is Joab Umole. I'm a manager in customs and border control, and also currently I'm the secretary to the Corruption Prevention Committee for the department. So thank you, Caro, and I'm glad to be here. Our viewers will be able to engage you, and we hope that you enjoy this session.
Mr. Omole, thank you for the introduction. And as you've said, you're a Corruption Prevention Committee member. I'm also an Integrity Assurance officer, very passionate with matters integrity, very passionate with mainstreaming ethics and integrity within KRA and also outside KRA. That means integrity is very paramount in our modus operandi. Mr. Joab Omole, before I continue, please tell us about your biography, your bio. For how long have you been in KRA? What have you been doing? What's your passion? Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Caro. I'm a customs officer by career. I've been working for Kenya Revenue Authority for 17 years now. That is since 2006. I joined as a graduate trainee and went through the training program for graduates. And after that, I've been able to work in several stations within the department, including but not limited to post-clearance audit, business intelligence. I've also been able to work in trade facilitation, one of the one-stop border posts in Kenya, that is Taveta. And I'm able to rise through the ranks from the level of revenue officer to manager position, where I got promoted in 2020. Further to that, I'm also Customs Secretary for the Corruption Prevention Committee, where we have our quarterly meetings in line with the Public Service Integrity Program. I'm also a UN ZEFACT expert on trade facilitation, courtesy of UNCTAD. I'm a graduate, become graduate accounting option from the University of Nairobi. So I think having been in customs for that number of years, customs has always been associated with activities that may interfere with its main mandate when it comes to integrity, in terms of revenue collection, trade facilitation, and even society protection. And this is because customs finds itself in a position where it's dealing with a lot of cargo at our borders, and also sometimes some of the procedures allow for a lot of discretion. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you so much, Mr. Omole. You are a prolific expert. You really added more feathers to yourself. I mean, being able to collect all those that we've heard from him mentions that he's very well versed with various operations on customs and border control. Integrity is the seed for achievement. It is the principle that never fails. That means integrity has to be mainstreamed in our processes. And we are going to hear more from Mr. Omole on what has been done by KRA to mainstream ethics and integrity. Mr. Omole, tell us about customs and border control. When was it operationalized?
Thank you, Carol. Just a brief overview of Customs and Border Control Department. As we may all be aware, we had Customs and Services Department back then under Treasury. It was created under the Act in 1978. Later on, upon formation of KRA in 1995, where we had 3 departments brought together, that is Customs Services Department, Domestic Taxes Department, and the Road Transport Department to form KRA. Then it was merged to have now what we have as Kenya Revenue Authority. Later on, it was changed to Customs and Border Control Department to take care of the new threat of global terrorism that we had, so that our mandate covered more on society protection and also restrictions and prohibitions. So that is why the name was changed to Customs and Border Control Department. Customs and Border Control is headed by a commissioner, and the commissioner reports to Commissioner General. As customs, we are found in 5 regions. We are in Southern region, that is Mombasa. You can find us in Nairobi, our headquarters. We are also in Western region, with the regional headquarters Kisumu. You can find us in Rift Valley, that is Nakuru, Eldoret. We are in Northern region, the borders for Somali. We have Garissa, Mandera, and the rest of those. In general, we are also found in all international airports, Kisumu, Mombasa, Eldoret, Nairobi. You will find us at the general post offices everywhere. You will find us in the internal container depots. You will find us also in the container freight station. We are available at the EPZ, that is the export promotion zones. We are available at the SEZs, that is the special economic zones. So each and every corner of this country where we are dealing with exports and imports, will be able to find customs and border control. And therefore, it makes sense that when it comes to regulation of trade, customs plays a major role. So it's not only revenue collection, Caro, that we do, but we also engage a lot in enforcement activities in terms of enforcing restrictions and prohibitions of goods coming or leaving the country. We also facilitate trade, and further, even the statistics that is used by the country, by the treasury and the government to make sound fiscal decisions rely on the statistics of exports and imports.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omole, for that prolific presentation. Tell us more about prohibited and restricted goods. We've been having proliferation of illicit goods in Kenya, and you've just mentioned about prohibited and restricted. Will you mind to elaborate a little bit to our viewers?
One of the acts that is enforced by Kenya Revenue Authority in general and Customs and Border Control specifically is the East African Community Customs Management Act that provides for the restrictions and prohibitions that are enforceable by customs administrations in East Africa. Kenya, being one of the signatories to the ESC protocols, is mandated to enforce restrictions that are covered under the third schedule of that particular act. So we work mostly with partner government agencies because the restrictions mostly are either based on our technical standards. They are either based on sanitary and phytosanitary standards, and therefore a permit is required before we are able to bring these products into the country or leave the country. A good example is medicaments. When medicaments are coming into the country, then these are restricted consignments that needs to have the approval of agencies like the Pharmacy and Poisons Board. When we have plants coming into the country, seedlings and anything that is horticulture, again, we have KEPHIS, that is the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Services, that is mandated to regulate these products. And where we come in is our act allows us to also enforce any laws that are governing imports and exports at any time in the country. And being at the forefront of clearance of these products, we must ensure that we restrict any of such goods that are provided for under the act. Now to come to the prohibitions, mostly proliferation of small weapons comes through our borders. We have explosives or items or raw materials that can be used to make the IEDs, the explosives, and even bombs that pose a risk to our country. It is also the mandate of customs and other border agencies, the police, the DCI, NIS, to ensure that these items do not enter into the country, and if they are entering the country, then they have permission or permit to be brought into the country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omole. And we've heard that on matters illicit trade, we work synergistically with other partner government agencies, and also we have a multi-agency framework that later on we are going to elucidate more with regards to collaborations that we have. So, Mr. Omole, what about other legal frameworks do we have? Apart from ECMA, you've talked about the East African Community to matters integrity, ethics, customs.
The first legal framework that we have is the KRA Act. That is where the act that forms Kenya Revenue Authority, where Customs and Border Control is a department. For Customs and Border Control, we have the East African Community Customs Management Act of 2004, and also supporting that act, we have the East African Community Customs Management Regulations of 2010 that guides the processing of imports and exports, including any goods transiting through our country. So we collect import duty based on that particular act. We also enforce the VAT Act 2013, VAT on imports, any goods imported to the country that attract VAT. That is the act that we enforce to be able to collect that revenue. We also have the Excise Duty Act of 2015, where we are able to collect excise duty on the imports being brought into the country. Further, we have the Miscellaneous Levies Fees Act of 2016. This has various levies that have been passed, various levies that customs is mandated to collect in terms of railway development levy, import declaration fees. We also have the export levies on some of the restricted exports like scrap metal and heights and screens that we use that act to collect. So those are the KRA revenue acts that we enforce. But that said and done, I indicated earlier that we also enforce any laws currently in force in the country on imports and exports, whether they are for other partner government agencies or whether they are regional laws or international laws where Kenya is a signatory to the laws.
Thank you very much for elaborating that. We also have the international laws and legal instruments that Kenya has ratified, and it's part of our laws. For instance, we have the United Nations Convention Against Corruption. We normally call it UNCAC. And for UNCAC, we normally commemorate International Anti-Corruption Day. Basically, it's normally held on 9th of December annually. And KRA is among the key stakeholders. We have a forum called the Kenya Leadership Integrity Forum, whereby it brings together all stakeholders. Again, also we have the African Union Convention on Preventing and Combating Corruption. And during that convention enables us to commemorate African Anti-Corruption Day, which will be held 11th of July. And again, KRA is normally among the key stakeholders with regard to participating in those activities. We have also other KRA integrity policies that we've been able to align to the domestic laws. And it's like we have the KRA anti-corruption policy. We have the KRA whistleblowing policy. We have a KRA conflict of interest policy and KRA gift policy. And these are meant to enhance voluntary compliance to KRA staff, and some policies are also applicable to our stakeholders. For instance, the KRA gift policy, also the KRA whistleblower policy. So, Mr. Mole, now we want to focus on the nitty-gritty about customs and border control. We've talked about the overview of customs, the legal framework, the regions, and also operational areas for customs and the border control. So I want to ask you, like, which initiatives has KRA put in place to curb corruption and mainstream ethics and integrity in Kenya Revenue Authority?
Thank you again, Caro, and viewers. Customs is vulnerable to corruption activities. Reason being, when it comes to clearance, for example, customs has a monopoly in clearance of the goods. Further, to mention that in enforcing some of the laws, regulations, and acts, and even the policies that we have, there's a lot of discretion that can be, there's a lot of discretion that the officers can use when implementing our laws. That means that there are loopholes that people can take advantage of, whether it's the clearing fraternity or our staff or our stakeholders, to make sure that we lose revenue and they use these loopholes for personal gains. Having said that, then it is important that for us to be able to actually actualize our goal of revenue collection, border protection, and even trade facilitation, then there is need to not only curb corruption, but also mainstream ethics and integrity by trying to prevent any integrity risk occurring and taking care of any loopholes that may be utilized by either officers or even our clients in a way to leak revenue from this government. So I'll start with the main areas, and I'll say KRA has strategic integrity initiatives that are pegged on 4 corners. One is on creation of awareness, integrity awareness. Another one is prevention, and also some of the strategies that we have are meant to detect. And finally, the 4th area are the strategic initiatives that are meant to deter any corruption activities or unethical practices that may be unbecoming to our organization. So KRA is one of the agencies that has implemented the Public Service Integrity Program. This program, Caro and viewers, was introduced in 2003 to be able to bring transparencies to operations of most or all government institutions, to be able to create awareness, to be able to have a level of certainty when dealing with government agencies. And KRA, being one of those agencies, rolled out the Public Service Integrity Program by ensuring that we have committees in place that are responsible for mainstreaming ethics and integrity. In KRA, we have the Integrity Assurance Officers Committee. We also have the CPC, that is the Corruption Prevention Committee at the departmental level. And at the corporate level, we have the Apex Corruption Prevention Committee. So just to elaborate a bit on the role of these integrity assurance officers, these are trained officers in matters corruption, risk assessment, and also risk mapping and risk ranking. They participate in preparation of the corruption prevention plan, as well as identification of the integrity risks that we have in the department. These integrity assurance officers meet monthly, and the report that comes from the integrity assurance officers committee are escalated to the next committee, that is the Corruption Prevention Committee, chaired by the Commissioner of Customs and Border Control. This committee meets quarterly and again discusses the corruption prevention plan, the bribery prevention plan, and any other key integrity risks that have been identified by the authority. From the Corruption Prevention Committee, we have the Apex. This is chaired by the Commissioner General and attended by the departmental and heads, the head of departments and all the commissioners. And this particular committee focuses on the key integrity risks of the department, on the measures that have been put in place, the impact of the initiatives that have been identified by our integrity assurance officers and implemented by our top management. So in as far as the public service integrity program is concerned, KRA is at the forefront of ensuring that we not only act after corruption has happened, but to ensure that we also prevent by sealing any loopholes that can be used. So these committees are very key, and the management of Kenya Revenue Authority and even that of Customs and Border Control have committed to ensure that any unethical practices are not accepted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omole, for elucidating about the Public Service Integrity Program, which was initiated by the Government of Kenya in 2003, and it was meant to enhance responsiveness by public officers. It was meant also to enhance transparency and accountability among public officers, and also integrity and ethics among public officers. Our viewers, Mr. Omole also talked about matters to do with initiatives that we've taken. For instance, he mentioned about deterrence measures, and we are going to focus on that also in nitty-gritty. Education and awareness, he talked about integrity assurance officers, the corruption prevention committees, and also the Apex Corruption Prevention Committee. He mentioned also about matters detection and prevention, which are quite key in our modus operandi. And we have a robust team of integrity assurance officers in the authority. Mr. Mole, tell us about automation. What about automation? It's also a strategy to mitigate matters corruption.
KRA, again, in general, and Customs and Border Control specifically, has invested a lot in automation. And the department leverages on technology to ensure that any loopholes that can be taken advantage of are sealed. Remember, we have various forms of corruption, and one of the forms of the corruptions that automation of KRA aims to prevent is what we call opportunistic corruption. Corruption where staff or our stakeholders look for loopholes that they can exploit for personal gain. So that said and done, KRA has invested in a customs clearance system referred to as the Integrated Customs Management System that is aimed at ensuring that all the processes are done in the system. In that way, we have a track, we are able to trace all the activities, we are able to trace all the operations that have been carried out in the system, and further seal the loopholes that may be exploited by either our own staff or our external stakeholders. So the Integrated Customs Management System, for example, limits the interaction between staff and our stakeholders. The clearing agents are able to access the systems, those who have been vetted those who have been vetted by the department and allowed access to our systems. There are some of the customs operations that have been automated that no longer require human intervention, like approval of the import declaration form. Also, there is no intervention for an entry to be processed. Once the system accepts payment from the bank, then the entry will be able to be processed without any intervention. Further, no cash payments are accepted by KRA. All payments are made to the bank. And through the payment gateway, we are able to receive the payment in the system and process. The system also has a robust risk management system backed up by our profiling and targeting unit to be able to identify any weaknesses or any loopholes for revenue leakage. So that is one of the systems. Another system that is used not only for revenue collection but also risk assessment is the Integrated Scanner Management System. We have an integrated scanner command center based at our headquarters. The scanner operations across the regions where our goods arrive, imports or exports. These goods are scanned, but the image analysis is done centrally at headquarters, and therefore There is also limited interaction between these officers who conduct scanner image analysis with our stakeholders. There is little room for interference unless is of course the behavioral aspects of corruption that cannot be automated. So it is an easier way to deal with the systemic loopholes in effects. So KRA has invested a lot in that sector. In terms of monitoring of cargo, the transfers that we have, the exports, we have the regional electronic cargo tracking system where KRA partners with URA and even Rwanda Revenue Authority to ensure that we have an overall or 360 degrees view of the cargo that is passing through our country not meant for local consumption, to ensure that this cargo is not diverted or dumped in the country without payment of taxes. And so many other systems, whether it is in terms of petroleum, we have a system for managing the oil stocks. At our passenger terminals, we have air passenger service system where we are able to collect the passenger fees. So in a nutshell, in terms of automation, we are able to curb the opportunistic corruption that may be exploited by officers or our stakeholders, realizing that there is a gap that has not been filled.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omole. Indeed, we've heard that KRA has leveraged on technology. Talk about the cutting-edge technology that KRA has been able to leverage on. Let's talk about centralization of customs processes. KRA has been able to centralize processes to facilitate trade. As we were told earlier, the mandate of KRA or the mandate of customs is to facilitate trade. So what about centralization of customs processes?
Thank you, Caro, and thank you, viewers. Once again, Customs and Border Control has in a bid to ensure that one, there is control in customs operations, has centralized some of our operations. Remember, in any government facility where there is a queue, where there is a long queue, and there is no proper queue management system, then we are able to find elements of exploitative corruption, because most people are always in a hurry. Nobody wants to waste time. Remember, time is money. So if you are not able to have your goods released because of the red tape that has been put in front of you by the organization or by any other clearance agency, then it gives an incentive for one to try to circumvent, or what we call cutting corners. That's why we have like the one-stop border posts at our borders, where all our partner government agencies involved in the clearance of exports and imports sit in one office, and all the clearance is done at the same time without having to incur excess cost or additional documentation for purposes of clearance of goods at the border. So that is one of them. The other one I'd mentioned is also centralization of the scanning scanning operations, where we have an integrated scanner management center, where image analysis is being done away from where the goods are being scanned. Another issue when it comes to intelligence or risk management, we have a centralized targeting center. This is the only unit that conducts targeting and profiling to be able to assist the authority in risk assessment and to ensure that we are able to make decisions based on that assessment. So another area also, before I forget, is in cargo monitoring. Again, we have the centralized cargo monitoring center that monitors goods moving along the northern corridor, and therefore they are able to detect if there is any interference with the customs electronic seals, and send alerts to our rapid response unit teams to be able to intercept the consignments before the goods are dumped or diverted into the local market.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Omole, for explaining to us. I want to talk about simplification and harmonization of customs processes. One of our KRA core values is being simple. We're supposed to be simple. We're supposed to be helpful. We're supposed to be trustworthy. We're supposed to be ethical. And this is aligned to our 8th corporate plan. When we talk about simplicity, like today, we're just trying to be simple, to elucidate to our viewers about simplification and harmonization of our customs processes. If we ain't simple, our processes will be complicated. But KRA has gone a notch higher to simplify its processes. Mr. Mole, still back to simplification and harmonization of customs processes. Tell us about the single customs territory, because we work with PGAs, we work with EAC countries, we work globally with other Commonwealth stakeholders. Tell us about SCT, as it's normally talked about.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, viewers. Again, this is meant to curb the opportunistic corruption that I had mentioned, where we require several documentation, where we require several processes before we are able to clear our consignments. Then again, it brings that incentive for taxpayers to try and cut corners. To prevent this, therefore, we have taken simplification and harmonization of some of our processes as a way to curb opportunistic corruption. So just to talk about the single customs territory that you have mentioned, previously at our borders, clearing agents and importers were required to have 2 sets of documents, one from the originating country and another from the country of destination. With the introduction of the single customs territory, then it means that we only have 1 document for clearance, and it is lodged at the country of destination. Further, clearance of goods are done at a one-stop border post, as I had already mentioned. This reduces the time used for clearance of goods. And remember, any hour, any minute that is wasted over and above the required time has costs associated with it. And these costs are normally transferred to our final consumers. Again, the issue of requirement to handle or submit physical documents for clearance, we have partnered with Kentrade, and both clearing agents and partner government agencies are able to submit and approve their permits through the single window system, accessible to both importers, exporters, and even clearing agents. And therefore, our officers are able to verify these documents, confirm these supporting documents from the system via an integrated window. We have integrated our integrated customs management system with the Kentrade single window system. And this therefore makes our processes simpler and easier to comply. Another area mostly for traders, they have a simplified trade regime because most of these cross-border traders deal with low-value goods, and sometimes the items that they deal with, the process of making a full declaration in the system may actually allow them, if forced, to be able to involve again in a kind of corruption that we call functional corruption. When your systems are prohibitive, when your systems are cumbersome, then one will always find a way of circumventing that particular process. So we have the simple trade regime, and at the borders, for example, those who are bringing goods that are less $2,000, you are required just to use the simplified certificate of origin to be able to clear the goods, whether it is for the East African community or the common market for East and Southern Africa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Omole. As we've been told about the single window system, we work closely or we collaborate with PGS. These are partner government agencies. And also we work closely with our clearing agents, and some of them are watching this engagement. Also we work closely with importers. We've also been implementation. Why do you feel, or rather our stakeholders, some of them, they have fake documentation? And really, what has been done maybe to limit fake documentation? I know our staff do vetting, but among other things that probably customs does, what could it be?
Thank you, Carol. Where you have, as mentioned, where you have the cumbersome processes, where you have so many sophisticated documents that are required to enable clearance or processing of goods at the border, then of course this gives an incentive to these clearing agents. However, through the single window system, all the partner government agencies have their own window sort of to approve their documents. So if a document is in the single window system, for example, the certificate of conformity approved by KEBS, then customs will rely on that document as a reliable document instead of relying on the one that is submitted by the importer or the clearing agent. So as far as partner government agencies, most of the documents now through the single window system, we have been able to curb that area. But there are documents that are not issued by any partner government agencies or any accredited institution, like the invoices. This is a gray area where we are facing a challenge because we are not really able to detect some of these forged invoices, given that there is no platform for such. So that's why we have to use other valuation tools whenever we think or detect that a customer or an importer has forged an invoice for purposes of evading payment of taxes. So apart from that area, we have really limited fake documentation in terms of permits and supporting documents for clearance, because the partner government agencies are able to personally take control of their clearance documents and permits.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Omole, for explaining that to us. I want to appreciate our viewers. I'm seeing questions being sent via our digital medium. I want to appreciate the questions from Korir John, the questions from Gwentai Peter, Winston Mwiti, among other stakeholders who are watching us. Thank you very much. We'll come back to the questions later on. Kindly allow us just to continue a little bit, and then we'll be able to embark on those questions and be able to answer the questions that you've asked. Thank you very much, our viewers, for following us. We are truly indebted. Mr. Omole, let's talk about compliance. Compliance is very key. In KRA, as I said, we talk about various strategic integrity initiatives, and some of them with regard to compliance is prevention. We mentioned about detection, we mentioned about deterrence, and also education and awareness. In our 8th corporate plan, we also mentioned about strategic initiatives to enhance integrity, and one of them was undertaking corruption risk analysis and prevention. We talked about the IOs, the integrity assurance officers being trained in KRA, also the corruption prevention committees. And during our engagements, we normally also work as risk analysis. We also talked about undertaking staff vetting and investigation. To maybe staff found culpable, we normally do investigation. Also to our stakeholders, we normally do investigation. So compliance is very key in what we do. With regard to matters customs and border control, please inform us about the various initiatives that promote compliance.
Thank you, Carol, and viewers. Again, compliance is still very low when it comes to our importers and exporters. We we can put it at around 30% or 40 thereabout for voluntary compliance. It's therefore important to reward compliance, to encourage our stakeholders to comply. Kenya Revenue Authority, Customs Border Control Department have introduced programs that promote and reward compliance. We have our Authorized Economic Operator program, where we have vetted importers, clearing agents, exporters, warehouse keepers. These are our prime customers who have been vetted and found to be compliant, and therefore are facilitated whenever they export or import their consignments without any much intrusion or clearance formalities. This is because we want to encourage people to comply. We want to give them incentives that if you bring your products or your goods through our borders and you have already been part of this particular AEO program, then you will not waste any time in clearance of your goods. We have what we call the blue channel that is actually already part of our clearance system. So it's able to identify an AEO clearing agent and AEO importer for them to be able to be expedited in terms of clearance of their goods. Just to note that for AEOs, once you lodge our documents with us and pay, it moves straight to pending removal, which in customs terms means release of your consignments without any further, without having to open the containers. Although we have, although we are clearing these AEOs, giving them expedited clearance, but we have mechanisms to be able to detect if any of them are what I can call cheating customs or involved in any unethical practices. We have the post-clearance audit function that is supposed to be able to audit. We have compliance checks that are being done by our AEO office to ensure that those who are vetted and found to be compliant and are being expedited when their goods are being cleared, that they are not only compliant, but they remain compliant throughout that particular period of that particular period where they are members. Second, we have the pre-arrival processing or clearance program. It is still at its infant stages, but is able to also assist clearance of compliant importers who are able to provide their documents very much early in advance to assist in risk assessment. When we have these clearance documents in advance, say 4 days or 2 days before clearance, then our customs officers are able to conduct a risk assessment and determine what kind of action will be taken once the goods arrive. One of the actions can be to release the goods immediately they arrive. Another action may be to intervene and conduct a partial or a full verification. Client customers who are able to provide their documents well in advance are able to be facilitated. And this is another way of promoting compliance. For our exporters, we have a green channel for the low-risk exports like tea and coffee to also assist them export their goods without facing any delays.
Wow. Thank you so much for elaborating that to us. And risk management, ladies and gentlemen, is very key. We must mitigate risks. And in KRA, we have a fully fledged risk management division that enables us to do risk management. On adherence and enforcement of anti-corruption laws and policies, Mr. Omole, we talked about the KRA policies. We mentioned about the KRA anti-corruption policy, whereby KRA is zero tolerance towards corruption. We talked about the KRA whistleblower policy. We talked about the KRA conflict of interest policy. the KRA gift policy and also the KRA code of conduct, which are quite very relevant to our processes. But let me focus on the regional and international, rather global laws that we have. On regional laws, Mr. Mole, maybe tell us about the ESC Regional Code of Conduct, and then maybe we'll be able to focus on the WCO revised Arusha Declaration. Tell us more about the ESC Regional Code of Conduct, because we have a program whereby we normally work in sync with East African community, and with regard to matters integrity, we have the East African Community Technical Integrity, Technical Committee on Integrity, and we normally work in sync with them, but we are going to delve deeper on collaborations. But tell us more about the regulatory framework of the ESC Regional Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, viewers. Kenya Revenue Authority, and because Kenya is a signatory to some of these economic blocks, one being the East African Community. We are also a member of the World Customs Organization. Therefore, we are bound to adhere and enforce some of the laws and policies that have been put in place by these organizations. As you are aware, Kenya Revenue Authority has a very robust code of conduct that is supposed to regulate the behavior of its officers. That said and done, and knowing that corruption is two-way, it takes two to tango. It is not only enough to have a code of conduct for government organizations, but because in this forum we also have our stakeholders, we have our partners, we have the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we have the KIFA fraternity. They also need to have a code of conduct for its own employees to be able to regulate how their officers behave. So in the ESC, we have the ESC Code of Conduct that governs the conduct and the behavior of employees of government institutions under the East African Community. That is Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda, Burundi, Tanzania, and even Southern Sudan. And of course, the late entrant into ESC is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we are not only looking at the code of ethics and conduct for our own employees or even Kenyan officers, but it is also very important to look at it from the regional aspect, because we are global and we deal with all kinds of stakeholders. So the East African Community Code of Conduct, which is actually already an approved document and in operation, is supposed to guide the whole of the region when it comes to code of conduct for customs officers. Remember, customs officers are faced with all kinds of corruptions. As I had mentioned, we talked about opportunist corruption because of the system loopholes. We have the functional corruption because of the ambiguous or the cumbersome processes that we may be having that we require our stakeholders, our customers to comply with, and they have to find a way of avoiding it. We also have what we call the expected corruption, where it says if everybody is doing it, why not me? That is also another thing that is very common when we talk about the kinds of corruptions that are available. And therefore, we have to look at all the instruments at our disposal that can be used to curb all kinds of corruption, whether it is coercive corruption, whether it is a disparate corruption because of maybe a matter that is affecting you personally, and you think because my mother is sick, for example, if I take this money, then this will be excused. These instruments have been developed to guide customs administrations to be able to mainstream ethics and integrity within these customs administrations. In the ESC, We also have the lifestyle audit policy. I'm glad that I actually participated in the drafting of these two important documents, the ESC Code of Conduct and also the ESC Lifestyle Audit Policy, just to confirm that custom officers of customs are living within their means and they are also within their incomes. So these are some of the instruments that I just want to bring to your attention. They are in the open. They are public documents, and you can just Google and download them for your own for your own use.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Mr. Omole, for informing us about the regional enforcement anti-corruption laws and policies that we have. I want to focus on the international or rather global laws that we have. Initially, our viewers had mentioned about the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, and the UNCAC Convention, we normally commemorate International Anti-Corruption Day, and it will be held in 9th of December. It is normally held annually. But with regard to the international laws, we have the WCO Revised Arusha Declaration 206. So what's your take on the acts, on the ESC Integrity and Anti-Corruption Strategy document, on the Arusha Revised Declaration? And I know it has 10 elements. Will you mind to mention to us those 10 elements and align it to probably what KRA has been able to do? You had mentioned earlier about automation, but literally just can mention quickly about the 10 elements of the Arusha Declaration, because it's one of the key documents that we have and we've been trying to enforce it in KRA.
The WCO Arusha Revised Arusha Declaration that came into force again in 2003 is one of the globally recommended instruments for mainstreaming ethics and integrity within customs administrations. It attempts to focus on all kinds of corruption, given that even the diseases that we have, we use different kinds of medicine. We cannot use a single approach in the fight against corruption. So the WCO Revised Arusha Declaration is anchored on 10 principles. And these are principles that are not only unique to customs, they can also be used even for our private organizations to be able to align and mainstream ethics within their organization. A key major principle of WCO Revised Arusha Declaration is automation. That is one of them, and I've already elaborated on how Customs and Border Control has leveraged on technology to ensure that any loopholes that are in the system that can be exploited are sealed. So I'll focus on the other 9 principles of Revised Arusha Declaration. The second one being leadership and commitment. To be able to commitment by leadership of whether it's a government organization or even a private organization. In KRA, I mentioned that we have put in place committees that have the blessings of the management, and the management themselves under the APEC CPC sit in these committees to ensure that before any unethical practices are detected, that they can be prevented by the organization. So this leadership and commitment calls for leadership to lead by example, because the majority of employees look to their managers and their bosses and emulate what they do. So it starts with leadership, and wherever we have commitment from leadership or management, then it follows that the employees will also follow suit. The other principle is on regulatory framework, where the customs laws and regulations and procedures should be harmonized and simplified to avert any functional corruption traits. That means that it should be easy to comply to the policies or the requirements that have been put in place. The other principle of this Arusha Declaration is transparency. And again, we are dealing in an environment that is sometimes very uncertain. In our dealings with our stakeholders, we are expected to be transparent. All our requirements should be out there in the public. They should be aware of what they are expected to do when they import and export their goods. With that level of certainty, then they are able to make sound decisions on what to do without going through any losses. So transparency, both internally and even externally, is key as one of the principles of the WCO revised Arusha Declaration. Code of conduct is another one principle, but I've also talked about that. KRA, of course, has already a code of conduct. I've talked about the EAC one. And staff are aware of the consequences of going against the provisions of the code of conduct. Measures have been put in place, and what is considered gross misconduct is clearly outlined, and the consequences are also clearly outlined. This is also meant to deter any unethical practices. When it comes to the other principle of human resource management, many a times people assume that with the high remuneration, then corruption can be reduced. But there needs to be a clear balance with not only the remuneration, but also the professionalism and the ethics of the staff themselves, so that even if the salaries are enhanced, then the officers themselves are professional and ethical to ensure that they work within what has been provided for them. The other principle, I think, is reform and modernization, and that is also an area where Kenya Revenue Authority has made many strides, just to ensure that we have a relook at our systems. We conduct systems reviews to identify loopholes. Where we require automation, we automate. Where we require change of how we work or change of how we do our things, to do away with the business as usual, then again, that is another principle that has been recommended by that particular declaration. Second but not last, the second last one is on relationship with our private sectors. We have, in this particular engagement, we have invited our key stakeholders because they are very key and instrumental when it comes to assisting the authority to ensure that our staff and even their staff are conducting themselves in an ethical manner. They are professional and within the agreements that we have with them. For example, with the KIFWA, that is the Clearing Agents Union, we have an MOU with them, and we expect their members to behave within the code that has been provided, to adhere to all our procedures that pertains to clearance of imports and exports, and the repercussions of failure to do that, like suspension from operating or dealing with any of our importers or exporters, or even the authority itself. Finally, I come to the last one, which is a very key one. It's about culture. Dealing with culture is not easy, And therefore, one of the principles is about an organization culture. If a culture of an organization is associated with corruption, and we normally look at the performance or the perception indices that are done by organizations like the TI, that is the Transparency International. For us to be able to remove that perception, it is important to work on our culture and ensure that our culture is not a culture of corruption, but is a culture of professionalism, a culture that is based and anchored on the core values. In KRA, we have what we call the tech, where those 4 principles of being ethical, being competent, being helpful, help us to define our culture. Many a times people assume that when everybody is doing something, then there's nothing wrong if I as an individual also do the same. But again, it does mean that 2 wrongs make a right. Changing this culture begins again from top management and narrows down to the first principle that I had indicated of leadership and commitment. So I think, Carol, those are just some of the principles of the WCO Arusha Declaration.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe just before I also forget on the other one on audit and investigations. Depending on the organization, we have some customs administrations that have the audit and investigation function within the department. In Kenya Revenue Authority, however, we have a separate department that is dealing with matters of investigations and also the internal affairs that is also part of that department, dealing with investigation of staff. So from there, you are able to also deter any unethical practices by way of sanctions, where some of these staff are subjected to disciplinary committee. Some of them are issued with warnings. Some of them, there's a provision that they can also be summarily dismissed depending on the nature of the misconduct as provided for under the Code of Conduct. So those 10 key principles can be used. Get this 2-page document available also.
The nitty-gritty. You mentioned that with regard to regulatory framework in Kenya, of course, nationally we have a Constitution of Kenya, and Article 10.2 of the Constitution talks about national values. And as an institution, KRA, we've been able to entrench national values in our processes, and we normally report to the President about the 17 national values that we have in the Constitution. And our staff have been sensitized, and they're quite aware about these national values. Chapter 6 talks about leadership and integrity. Again, also, we talk about Article 232 of the Constitution. We have the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act 203. And at your own time, you can focus on that because these are policies, or rather anti-corruptional laws that we have, and we are supposed to be able to be well-versed with them. Also, we have the Process of Crime and Anti-Money Laundering Act 209, which was reversed again in 2012. We have the Public Officer Ethics Act, we call it POEA. We have the Leadership and Integrity Act 2012. Again, we have the Bribery Act 2016. We have the Public Finance Management Act 2012, and also the Penal Code, which we are all supposed to be well informed about. Ladies and gentlemen, also, he talked about transparency, and he said with regard to transparency, we have integrity assurance officers, we have the corruption prevention committees in KRA, and also he mentioned about boosting the morale of staff. In KRA, we have what we call, we've been able to reward, we normally reward we have a framework of rewarding our staff. We have a program called Integrity Award Framework. Maybe Somole, will you mind to inform us whether we have officers who are nominated from Customs and Border Control who have been upholding integrity in line with the strategy for morale and also organization culture?
Thank you, Carol. Just as also had mentioned, it's important to reward compliance for our stakeholders. The same way, it is important also to reward ethical behavior for our staff. And I'm glad to report that the authority has put in place an integrity award framework. And beginning this year, then each department, customs included, are required to nominate officers who are considered of high moral standing and ethical and professional for consideration for the award in line with the Integrity Award framework. And Kara, I want to confirm that Customs and Border Control have already concluded this process of nomination of the officers and submitted names of 2 officers to ISO, that is the Intelligence Strategic Operations and Investigations and Enforcement Department, for purposes of vetting. And thereafter, once the process is complete, taking into consideration also, of course, of the performance, this staff must also not be under performance watch or must not be under the PIP performance improvement plan. Then they'll be able to awarded. And we also have a monetary gain that one of these awardees will be able to get once they are vetted. So I think I want to appreciate that this is something that has been long overdue, and having put this integrity award framework in place, then it will be an incentive for also for staff who are already in that, who are already professional, and also those who are not, to encourage them to embrace ethical behavior.
Wow, indeed, we really need to appreciate staff who uphold integrity, because they really do great work. And some of them have been involved in conducting risk assessment, bribery, corruption, and risk assessment, and also coming up with mitigation plans. We call them mitigation plans. And also some of them have been involved in creating awareness to our staff and also stakeholders. We have corruption prevention committees, we have IAOs, detention officers, who have been creating awareness to our staff, to our stakeholders, about the need to entrench integrity in our modus operandi. So maybe, Mr. Mel, just tell us about your IAOs. Have they been creating awareness to clearing agents, the private sector, with regard to the KRA integrity program?
Now, the integrity assurance officers for Customs and Border Control have been very instrumental in creating awareness, doing capacity building in as far as integrity matters is concerned. The department has a plan, an annual sensitization plan. Of course, we partner with our trade facilitation division, who have the taxpayers sensitizations and stakeholder engagements. Whenever we are engaging our taxpayers, teaching them about matters tax, there is normally a slot for integrity presentation, just to create awareness on what KRA is doing, but also what is expected of them as our stakeholders. Of course, we also partner with ISO department, who is that is the department that is also responsible for mainstreaming ethics and integrity in the authority. We are able to reach out to our customs agents. We are able to reach out to Kenya Association of Manufacturers, their members of Kenya Private Sector Alliance, the oil marketing companies, some of them who are actually tuned in, and they can confirm that we not only give them the requirements as far as the compliance with our revenue policies is concerned, but also our expectations in terms of how they deal with our officers and how they interact with our officers.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll come to the measuring the impact of the integrity program. But basically, I know in KRA with regards to matters corruption, bribery and corruption risk assessments, We normally develop and implement the bribery and corruption risk assessment and also the mitigation plans. And all staff in KRA are supposed to be involved in the identification of the corruption risks, which is quite important. And all divisions also implement the mitigation measures. They normally submit monthly monitoring and evaluation reports, that is M&E reports, to the Department of Intelligence, Strategic Operation, Investigation and Enforcement. And also, they normally do what we call verification of the, we normally verify the implementation status through an audit by an independent team, which is normally done semi-annually just to check the impact of the KRA integrity program. So, Mr. Mole, I want us to go to the questions. We've been asked various questions before we finalize. We are almost at the tail end of this session. And we have a question from, what is KRA doing on traders who don't, or rather, traders who are not registered on VAT and they don't issue ETR receipts? Somebody called Mr. Guantai Peter is saying that many people file new returns as a matter of compliance and not being a true reflection of one's tax returns. What strategies have you established to improve public integrity on filing tax returns? You're welcome, Mr. Mole.
Thank you, viewers, for the questions. If I've gotten the questions right, one of our viewers, that is Maureen, is asking on what KRA is taking on those who have those traders who have not registered on ETR. I want to submit that this is an area that is handled by our sister department, domestic taxes department, and it is important for our viewers to know the threshold of those who are supposed to register for VAT. This is actually done by our taxpayer services unit in domestic taxes, and what I would want to urge the members that they are supposed to be able to report some of these. We have an enforcement team in domestic taxes, and therefore, as we conclude this interview, then I will request Caro to actually give you avenues where you can report such. If KRA finds that those who are dealing with those who have not registered or the ETRs, or they are not issuing ETR receipts, and this is reported and we have evidence to the same, then of course enforcement measures will be taken. So there is important, it is important to report some of these vices, and also, of course, my sister department will be able to create awareness when it comes to the requirement for registration of either the ETR or even the VAT obligation.
All right. Thank you very much for the response. Another question, someone is asking, what are the benefits of being a KRA agent? Being a KRA customs agent?
Okay. All our customs agents are vetted, and they are the only ones who have access to our customs management system. They are able to assist in preparation or making of declarations for our exporters and importers. And therefore, the benefits of a clearing agent is threefold. It is to our own as KRA, we are able to utilize their services to fast-track clearance of goods through our system. Further, we can hold them accountable in case of any revenue lost or any malpractices in terms of non-compliance with the customs and tax policies that we have. So that is the benefit from the government side. From the importers and the exporters side, at least they can also be able to use the services of registered customs agents to fast-track clearance of their goods at the port, having been trained and are able to access and navigate through our system. Further, it's easier or to deal with somebody you can trust or somebody you know where you can follow in case your goods have any issues. Many a times you've had people who have been duped when they're importing or exporting goods because they are dealing with the fraudsters. You are able to find a list of all our accredited clearing agents normally posted in our website so that you actually know which people you are dealing with. It's also a source of employment and a source of income for those who are employed by those companies. So the benefits are not only towards the government but also towards the public and also the clearing agents themselves in terms of a source of income and livelihood.
Right. Thank you very much for that response. Another question from Mr. David Kalama. He's saying that my concern is on the centralization of key offices like a BTO. Can we have technical staff to the group so that they can avoid delays and storage charges whenever technical issues arise?
Thank you for that question. BTO is a business transformation office that is responsible for automation of our processes. However, to answer the question, this is not necessarily done by BTO, but we have help desks that are able to assist, and also our ICT department. So any issues that are, any system issues should be reported to our help desks, whether in Nairobi or in Mombasa. We have hotlines that can also be used to report. For ICMS, we have even an email that can be used to report system issues. So it does not really require decentralization of the BTO office, but rather having help desks all over our stations, even the regions. I know we have a couple of help desks in Mombasa, in Nairobi, and our border stations. However, we do not have, I still know we do not have our help desk in some of that or increase the number of help desks that we have. But again, things having gone digital, I just ask that we use the email addresses that we have, the telephone numbers that we have. Again, we have hierarchical escalation of matters. You'll find if you're in Mombasa and you are dealing, you are having a system problem, the first contact person is an officer in that station. If the officer is not able to assist you, there's a supervisor in that station. We move on until the chief manager, so that before the issue comes to the attention of the commissioner, then this is an issue that has been dealt with, understood, even at the ground level, to know that it is something that requires headquarter intervention. Otherwise, the ICMS team are always on standby to be able to assist where we have system downtowns and issues that can be can prevent our agents and importers from clearing their goods through the port.
Oh, thank you very much. On question of petroleum, someone called Mr. Mi Triveta is asking, how will we claim VAT on fuel, yet the petroleum station just issue an ETR?
Just come again, Caro.
They're saying, how will we claim VAT on fuel, yet the petroleum stations issue an ETR?
Issue an ETR or don't issue an ETR. I think it's supposed to be don't issue an ETR, because if they issue, then you are able to claim because you have something to back up your claim.
All right. Mr. Mukaya Clinton is saying, well-articulated session. I'm getting feedback from our viewer. They say that it's good job, keep up. It is very informative. So we thank our viewers for following. And as we come to the tail end of this session, I'm going to inform our viewers about the corruption reporting channels, which is quite important because they're supposed to know on how they can report various issues with regard to our processes. Samuel, we've talked about the Public Service Integrity Program, PSIP. But in our 8th corporate plan, we have other strategic priorities that we focused on. Maybe you can mention to us about just highlights on other strategic areas that we focused on. We've talked about maybe data mining and AI. Maybe you can just mention to us as we finalize.
Thank you, Caro. Apart from the PSIP, that is the Public Service Integrity Program, I'd mentioned that we have strategic integrity initiatives that KRA has put in place in ability to mainstream ethics and integrity. So we have the 8th corporate plan, and the 8th corporate plan has 3 key strategic integrity initiatives. This corporate plan is normally for 3 years. The current one ending this year, 2023. And the key strategic initiatives under this plan include creating integrity awareness to all our staff and stakeholders. It also includes the other aspect of PSIP of actually be able to identify corruption risks and implement the corruption and bribery plan. And another is the issue of lifestyle audits and also lifestyle audits and vetting of customs, not customs, but KRA officers. Apart from the corporate plan, KRA also under the Kenya Leadership Integrity Forum, that is under the Kenya Integrity Plan, that is the KIP. I want to believe that most of you are aware that we have a national plan for mainstreaming ethics and integrity, and KRA is a member of the Kenya the Kenya Leadership Integrity Program under the multi-agency framework, and we do collaborative enforcement with other partner government agencies to ensure that one, we curb not only economic crimes, but also other organized crimes like human trafficking, like money laundering. And therefore, you'll find in that particular plan, we are collaborating again with the likes of Asset Recovery Agency, the DCI, the NIS, Office of the Attorney General, the ESCC as the main organization that is charged with with curbing corruption in the country.
Thank you very much. And just to add, probably on matters automation, of course, KRA is also working on a blockchain technology. We have also machine learning, artificial intelligence. We have a fully fledged department that is called Technology, Innovation and Artificial Intelligence. We do data mining also, and also the aspect of institutionalizing KRA culture and value system, which we mentioned earlier. So, ladies and gentlemen, with regard to matters to do with complaints and corruption reporting, we have an informal reward framework, and this is an incentive that is normally given to the public to share information that can lead KRA KRA to recover taxes. And this incentive basically is whereby under Section 5A of the KRA Act provides that a person is entitled to a reward as follows, where the information leads to recovery of unassessed taxes or duties. That person will be rewarded 5 million or 5% of the taxes or duties recovered, whichever is less. So that means KRA has an informal reward framework whereby we normally reward our informers. Whenever time they give us information that enables us to collect revenue, we give them a 5% of what they've been able to recover to a maximum of 5 million. Also, we have other reporting channels. You can email us at cic@kra.go.ke or corruption reporting at kra.go.ke, or you can walk in person to Times Tower if you're within Nairobi, or you can go to any other KRA office and report any matters of corruption. You can also write to our Commissioner General through Complaints and Information Center, CAC. Our address is 48240, Nairobi. You can call us through 0726 984 668, 0726 984 668, or 0709 017 700 /800. We also have a toll-free number, which also you can call us through. And our toll-free number is 0800 721 888. 0800 721 888. Again, also we have a new baby in the house called the iWhistle. And when you whistle, KRA is able to act. So iWhistle is a web-based anonymous reporting system. And through iWhistle, you whistle and you'll be able to act. You can report all bribery, concealment, abuse of office, conflict of interest, or also fraud or diversion of goods, and also tax evasion cases. You can check iWhistle on our website. You can go to https iwhistle.kra.go.ke, and you'll be able to report anonymously. And again, your information will be treated with utmost confidentiality. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption perception index in KRA has really reduced, as Mr. Mole had said, and through the various reforms that KRA has been able to have, our perception survey, or rather the index, is at 31.3%, and these are because of the strides that have been able to be made through automation, through modernization, through transparency, among other initiatives that have been undertaken by the authority. Initially in 2014, the overall corruption perception survey has significantly improved from 52.7% in 2014. 2017 we were at 32%, and then we kept on decreasing to 39% in 2019, and then currently we are at 31.3%. This is because of the various initiatives that have been undertaken. So, Mr. Mole, we are winding up. Probably, do you have a quote for us that probably we can end with before I conclude?
Thank you, viewers, and thank you, Caro. As we come to the end, my closing remarks. I just want to say that we do not have scarcity of anti-corruption laws and policies, but it depends on how these anti-corruption laws and policies are implemented. It requires participation of each and every one of us, not on the enforcement body, not on the government alone, but also individual participation. Remember, no one is born corrupt or born not corrupt. These are behaviors that we pick along the way, and therefore it means there are things that we can be able to change. So my parting shot as I leave is if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, again, nothing else matters. So the gist is on that else part that I've mentioned. That is a quote by Harvey Mackey. If you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have it, again, nothing else matters. So focus on that else, and you'll be able to choose which side you want to be. Thank you, viewers.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I want to appreciate our subject matter expert, Mr. Joab Mole. I believe that we've been able to understand our processes and also what KRA has been able to put in place to curb corruption, especially on matters customs and border control. Also want to appreciate our sign language interpreter, Madam Sandra. KRA is an inclusive institution whereby we cater for persons abled differently or persons with disability, and through sign language interpretation they're able to be reached out for them to understand our processes. And also I want to thank our team, our crew, the production team, for the splendid work that they've done during the coverage of this event. Also want to appreciate myself as the moderator. I believe that been able to understand the nitty-gritties with regards to matters integrity and ethics. Thank you very much, our viewers. We wish you well, and we will continue to uphold ethics and integrity in what you do. And as KRA, we are customer-centric, we are selfless servants, and we are willing to serve our taxpayers. Thank you very much.
File returns, by the way.
Makansho like file and returns.
Atirere. Mufailete returns shanyusha KRA.
Isa file returns. Podi. Deadline chiegni.
Najue. No file returns yako.
Wachire kwa file returns chao.
Mara wa file returns.
Ndirenda uririkane ku file niguo tikagie penalty. Uguo file umuthi.